Hey, this is Charles Yao with Believe in the Fight Game, and today my guest is Professor Robert Hill of Gracie Barra, Glendale. You're going to learn a lot on this interview and podcast because Professor Robert Hill directly trained and even was a neighbor of Master Carlos Gracie Jr. He also went to Brazil for a short amount of time to learn about the Brazilian culture, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and to concentrate his studies with Professor Master Carlos. Also in this interview, you'll hear and learn the difficulties of trying to run a business, him changing his career, going from an IT director and consultant and leaning towards opening up his own school, and also the trials of hiring a black belt that's not within your same school or system, that hasn't been homegrown or a farm system student of yours. So here's Professor Robert Hill of Gracie Barra, Glendale, and we open up the interview with me asking him about one of his hobbies, barbecuing. Thanks.
You know what? So I can't remember when, maybe a little after she came along, I got a certificate for a class to do barbecue. And it was with this guy in Diamond Bar. His name is Harry Soo, S-O-O. And, he's fantastic theory of barbecue and everything he does. He does it the cheapest he can do it. He does it the most scientific ways possible. And I take this class. It was back in like August. It was so hot. But he taught us everything about barbecue. The four main competition meats, which was pork shoulder, pork ribs, brisket, and chicken. So I just like to do it. I did it, and I took the class, and I bought a smoker. And then one thing led to another, and I have two smokers. And then I decided, you know what? There's a weird little competition circuit for barbecue around here, Texas-style barbecue. And so I just did it. I just jumped in, with a couple folding tables and a couple smokers, and I did horribly the first couple of times.
You mean competition-wise or just starting? Oh, okay.
Yeah, both. You experiment a lot, but yeah. And then I ended up doing competition barbecue. And I just ended up falling in love with it. It's a great escape from everything. You trim it, you rub it, you do what you got to do. You throw it on the smoker, and then you just sit there and enjoy being outside. And then the competition aspect of it just kind of spoke to me just through jiu-jitsu. It's just, you want to compete. You want to see how you're doing out there in the world. And so it was fun. I did it for 2 years. Now I do it recreationally, and sometimes I make a buck.
Was that something that you wanted to dive in, or just so happened this guy, Sue, had the opportunity to teach you that, or did you really seek the barbecue scene?
I didn't go after it. I knew about it. Like, everyone's heard of ribs. Really, there isn't much barbecue in Southern California. It's mostly comes from Santa Maria, Central Coast, which is tri-tip, and tri-tip is a quick and easy meat. And everyone thinks that when they barbecue, it's hamburgers and hot dogs, or maybe a few steaks or something like that. Barbecue, low and slow smoking, is very different than grilling. There's a little overlap at a certain point, but really they're two very different things. You ask anybody from Texas, we're going to go barbecue, and you show up, or they show up, and they have hamburgers and hot dogs, they're going to be offended. They're going to be like, no, where's the
That's
brisket?
grilling.
Yeah. Shh. So, it's a lot of fun, and it's not common. There's really hard to find barbecue around here. And people tell me that I do a really good job at it, so I'll keep doing it.
Yeah, for the listening and viewing audience, I've been always like an admirer of how Professor Robert Hill runs his academy. So we've always established rapport, and just take this in as data. But, I was taking care of my dad before he passed, so I was flying back and forth in Manila, Philippines. So before we started training privately, I noticed the spread of jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. But a big faction we're already breaking away from the Gracie Diet, because people are people, right? And even I was blessed to interview this guy from Renzo Gracie family, Professor Christina, who's a brown belt under Renzo Gracie. And he's a big connoisseur of burgers and whiskey. And in Asia, it's a big thing where food is important. So there's like food grappler sites. Do you find that increasing here in LA or just in general as a scene?
You know, a little bit. Here's what I'll tell you about the. You brought up jiu-jitsu and you brought up food.
Sure.
I can tell you one of the first stories that I remember of training at what became the Gracie Barra headquarters here in Southern California, or in Irvine. So I started in, I think, 2005. I was a white belt. I walked in there and Professor Marcio Feitosa was teaching classes. Master Carlos was there. I think I was there before, I think, like Professor Flavio and Pipio showed up, or I think Andre Fernandez was there. And they were all teaching class. We were figuring out the Gracie Barra method and how it was going to work here in Southern California. Anyway, I'm a random white belt. I'm a pudgy white guy. I have no business being there, but I'm there every day. And Master Carlos was teaching, and I got a cramp in my calf. Keep in mind, little backstory. I'm from Wisconsin, where it's meat and cheese and beer. That's a staple of the diet, right? So I get a calf cramp, and I'm down there, and I'm trying to I know what's going on. Master Carlos walks over, he grabs my foot and he just bends it back, and I'm like in a lot of pain. And he just kind of looks at me, points at me and goes, "Too much red meat," and then just walks away. Like that was like one of the first sets of words he ever said to me was "too much red meat." And it was like, I didn't know any better. It was like the poster came off the wall to yell at me, right? I've told that story a couple of times, but I still remember it really vividly, but at that point, jiu-jitsu and food really kind of meshed together a little bit. And I started to learn what they were telling me, which was, if you eat a certain way, you will perform a certain way. And so, you begin to dive in and learn about the Gracie Diet, which is super complicated. It's like it cuts foods in like 8 categories, and you can't mix the 2 categories. It's a pain in the ass. I don't think anybody follows it. I think it's a wonderful idea, but I don't think anybody does it.
Sure.
But I started to learn about food, and then I started to play with diet. And I have learned that I think one of the best diets I ever did was the Whole30, and I did that a couple of times. But I learned a lot about meat in that time, where if you just take very poor quality meat, it is very different than the high quality meat. If you're making hamburger helper, it probably doesn't make a difference. But when you're trying to perform a certain way, you have to go after these more higher end meat products, and prepare them yourself and kind of make them more whole, really. It's your own vegetables, your own stuff. Then I saw a change in my performance. So I thought in the beginning, meat might not be the best thing for me. And maybe I go pescatarian, which was like just chicken and fish. I went that route and I felt great. But then I added high quality red meat back into it. I took meat completely out of my diet for a little while. I went completely vegetarian, which was an awful decision. Not that I did. I felt terrible. It's just I couldn't get the right nutrients in, and I was trying to do it the best way possible, but I gave up on it. I went back to pescatarian. Now I professionally barbecue. So it bounces around, I think everybody's got an opinion on food because of that, because with jiu-jitsu, you immediately see a result. If you eat bad lunch, you'll have bad training session. It's immediate. There's no lag. If you eat really well, you wait your 4 hours, you digest properly, you drink the right water, or you drink water, and then you train. I performed well. From a school owner point of view, what always got me was people said, I can't afford jiu-jitsu. I can't afford jiu-jitsu. You know what? What would happen is the people who would cut out their Friday night going out, drinking or eating or dinner once a week, they found that they were coming to jiu-jitsu on Friday instead. They would show up Saturday morning too, because they felt good because they didn't destroy themselves Friday night. And then since they weren't going out 4 times a week, all of a sudden they had enough money to pay for jiu-jitsu. So the food aspect of it made several different differences for me. How I performed, how much money I had, and how well I could do jiu-jitsu. And that I think imprinted on me from a very early time.
Right. So in regards to training at the HQ, the mighty HQ in Irvine, how much of that was being preached, or was it really more like training jiu-jitsu based? Could you feel it? Could you feel it? Oh, everyone's healthy eating here. This is, check my chakra. I'm paying for this $11 press juicery.
No, it was the professors there at the time, and still today, even though they have hundreds and hundreds of students, it's always a conversation that happens maybe after training, or it's 1 or 2 small comments made on the mat that are positive. This never, it's never, hey, look, if you want to go out and have in and out 6 days a week, awesome, go for it. But they tell you right away, look, watch what you eat, and then watch how you perform, and then you make the best decision yourself. Nothing was ever pushed.
Okay.
It was always implied. It was just kind of there, and then we all learned it on our own. I spent a lot of time personally with Master Carlos. Truth be told, I'd go to his house and I'd help him fix his computer so he could play video games. And in those personal conversations, there was a lot more passed on to me about the way that he eats, and then what he eats and how he eats. I think there's once or twice where he'd come up and he just handed me a glass of something, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "I don't know, just drink it." So okay, you just drink it. He's always been experimenting with different foods. He's always been experimenting with how things react to his body and how he reacts to them. So it wasn't pushed, but it was always there. It was always oh, what are you eating? Oh, what are you eating? And of course the competition guys came down to tell you what they were always eating.
And one of the main reasons why I wanted to put you on the good blast and interview you, because you're one of the few people that directly trained with the man, with Carlinhos, right?
Yep. I trained with him quite a bit, more than I think people kind of recognize or kind of would want to realize. Because when Gracie Barra started here in Southern California, I was, like I said, I was really lucky. I didn't know what I had. I wish that I could go back and tell myself, look, you need to go every day. But I went in there, and I think Master Carlos was there for a few months out of the year, and then he'd end up going back to Brazil and then doing some work there. And that's when Marcio and Andre would handle things, and then he would come back, and then he would really teach a bunch of classes, and then it would kind of this revolving door of these 3 or 4 guys. And then Pipio came in, and then Andre, Professor Flavio came in, and we actually ended up living on opposite ends of a same apartment complex in Lake Forest. So I didn't do it often, but I found out he lived right across the street from me. So it was very, very consistent. I could see him a lot. Once he figured out I could fix computers, then it was all over from there. That was my job at the time. So wait,
so were you living in or working in Mission Viejo when you were working in IT and consulting, which is your Irvine friend that got you into jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, Irvine.
It was in Irvine itself.
I lived in Irvine, Lake Forest, and the business that I had was there, or business that I worked for was there in Irvine. And then, yeah.
I listened to the podcast, How I Built This.
Okay.
From what I've learned through speaking to you, taking private lessons, and looking up your bio, you started training as you were like a kids instructor when you were a blue belt. It was by accident, stuff like that, where daylight savings time, hey, Robert handled this.
That was so that was actually one of the first adult classes I ever taught. So I was teaching I had extra time. That was it. I had extra time. I had a really flexible job, and I would show up at the academy early. Professor Andre said, "Hey, do you want to help with the kids' classes?" And I joined a guy named Jeff and a buddy of mine, Paul Barbosa. He was there too, and we ended up teaching the kids just because we had the time. And Professor Andre had his plate full starting up and dealing with the IBJJF, and so he was kind of like, "Hey guys, if you handle these kids, I'll give you a half an hour private lesson before the class." And that's what we did. So I got paid in private lessons from Andre. I wish I could remember half of that stuff. But anyway, yeah, I was a blue belt at the time, and it worked out wonderfully for us. I had a great time doing it, and it laid the seeds of instruction really early on. Again, right place, right time. And then I think the first actual class that I taught, first actual adult class I taught was daylight savings time. I showed up on time. There was like 8 of us outside, and we called Marcio and said, "Marcio, class is starting." "What do you mean? We still have an hour." I'm like, no, the clock's rolled back, man. And he said, "Well, who's there?" And they named off names. He goes, "Robert can teach it." And so, I mean, look, Marcio, I think Professor Marcio showed up, I think like I got the warm up in, and then I got like into the first technique, and he rolled in and took it over from there. But yeah, a lot of my life in jiu-jitsu has been right place, right time, and just not giving up.
With the start of teaching, was that when you go, "You know what, I'm done with IT"? Or was it way before that? Or did it have to build?
It built up. It was time. I spent some time. Teaching was fun, but again, I was a blue belt, and so I was really trying to develop jiu-jitsu and take advantage of what I had. Teaching was just something because I had the extra time, and I got to make some cool friends and develop deeper relationships with the professors there. So it just kind of grew over time to be something like, I could do this. This is kind of cool. Like, I really enjoy it. I didn't like sitting in an office. I don't belong in a corporate environment at all. Not anymore. And so, around my purple belt, I think I started to think, oh man, maybe I could do this for a living. I think someone opened up an academy in Garden Grove. I think that was one of the first academies that opened outside the headquarters. And I was about a purple belt at the time. And I thought to myself, like, I think maybe I can do that. And that's when I really started to think about it.
So what was it? See, the podcast, How I Built This, is about entrepreneurs who struggle. They share their struggle and how they made it through. And you can imagine the math of getting to 10. Sometimes it's 20 minus 10. It's 1 plus 1 plus 1, 5 times. It's so many different maths, right? In succeeding. Maybe you could share some of the difficulties of funding the project, I mean, the struggle.
How much time do you have?
Hey man,
there's so many struggles.
This is your time to shine, brother. So what was the first step? Right. Like, what were the initial first steps where you got, you know what? I'm going to try this. Oops, that did not work out and it failed.
I would have to say, so I opened my academy as a brown belt. So I was a 2nd degree brown belt. I had 2 stripes on my brown belt when I decided I was going to go ahead and do this. And
this is in Glendale.
In Glendale, yeah. I was originally going to open up in Pasadena.
Right.
'Cause I just liked the area, And at this point, all of Orange County had been overly populated, I thought, with jiu-jitsu. There was a lot of jiu-jitsu in there. And so I wanted to move into LA. And the furthest out was kind of Pasadena. I liked the area. Thought it was a beautiful place. At the time, there was a guy there named Hamalo Bahal. And they had a different jiu-jitsu academy. It wasn't a Gracie Barra yet. It became Gracie Barra Pasadena. And I knew this. I thought, Bahal's Gracie Barra stuff. I'm like, I am not going to even think about being near Bahal. And so one of my friends went, "Why don't you just move over?" Garrett Glava, he was helping with the real estate at the time. And he goes, "Why don't you just move over to Glendale?" So I did. I didn't even know Glendale existed. I hadn't. And then I end up, it'll be 10 years next month. Actually, we've been open.
Oh, nice. Congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks. If you want to come by and have a cupcake 6 feet away from me, that's about the only thing we can do. You're welcome to.
I'm down. I'm with it. Say cupcake. I'm there, man.
Yeah. So yeah, we're coming up on 10 years. So opening as a brown belt, at the time, there was no franchise agreement. At the time, between myself and Gracie Barra, there was a one-page letter, a memorandum of understanding that Master Carlos, and I think Professor Flavio signed, and that was it. By the time I actually opened, we had the franchise agreement in place. So, you know, it was also 2010, so money wasn't as difficult to get. Real estate was a lot cheaper than it is today. But still, you know, I signed a lease for like $6,500 a month with no students and maybe a month, 2 months of residual of actual money, and then rolled the dice and opened the doors. I put the mats down. Some of the early challenges, you know, a lot of it is learning how to respond to people. Jiu-Jitsu, I don't think, when you teach a class of Jiu-Jitsu, you teach 15 minutes of technique, maybe. That's it. You're conveying Jiu-Jitsu, actually adding to someone's Jiu-Jitsu takes maybe 15 minutes. The rest of the entire hour is spent seeing people, responding to their personalities, making sure that they're with the correct partner. That it's all about creating an environment that facilitates the right amount of learning. Look, if you take two guys and throw them in a room, teach them a couple arm locks, and then let them fight, are they going to learn jiu-jitsu? Eventually. But if you have 15 people, and if you can match them appropriately, and you can make the environment fun and safe and clean, and make them feel like they're having fun, you're going to get more learning done. You understand? So that was what I got to really cut my teeth on as a kids instructor. Because kids, as you can look at this kid right here, you can tell, like, they don't hide anything. They tell you right away what their opinions are.
I don't like this.
Exactly. You know, and so when you look at people training, you can look and say, those two don't mix. So it was learning that took some time. And I think that once I figured that out, once I learned how to read that, my classes really changed a lot. And my retention went up a lot. You know, one of the challenges I had too was that I wasn't comfortable selling jiu-jitsu. I was very much in love with the product of jiu-jitsu, and I didn't think like, well, I want to teach everybody. And so you end up undercutting jiu-jitsu a little bit and selling yourself short. That was one of the problems that I started with. That is something that you had to get over. You had to get over, like, really changing the mind about that. Like, no, I love jiu-jitsu. It has to put food on my table, and I can't devalue it in any way.
And to keep loving it. And that way you don't, you have this resentful feeling towards jiu-jitsu. Absolutely. You know, but then also you kind of open this door to people. Okay. Yep. You kind of open this door to people to say, hey, this is jiu-jitsu. And if you go, hey, this is jiu-jitsu, it costs $200 a month, but I don't feel comfortable. Like, my jiu-jitsu may not be worth $200. You know, in my head, you're thinking this, so I'll charge you only $150 or, you know, maybe $100 or something like that. They lose out on the value of jiu-jitsu as well. When they pay for jiu-jitsu and they pay you what you're worth, they feel jiu-jitsu is worth more too. So you can't undersell your product, because then it just spoils it what it really is. You know, it really is like this scarce product. It's a really valuable product. So treat it that way, you know, and people will see it that way, and then that attitude can kind of spread throughout the whole community. I think I kind of got a little scatterbrained and sidetracked there, but
no,
I love it when people, you know, go left. I love that.
Okay. Yeah, you know, just jiu-jitsu is really important. And actually, this pandemic that we're in, man, it's been very interesting to see how people are, because everybody who loves jiu-jitsu has been forced away from jiu-jitsu. They've been pushed into their homes. We've had to change business models like crazy. You don't understand the change that, you know, has taken place. Or I mean, you do, but you get the idea. It's crazy. The number of people who I get telling me, I miss it so much. When are you going to open? I miss it so much. You know, I need this. They're missing this tangible thing that used to happen to them, where they got their hands on somebody and they moved and they exercised and all this. And I see people going stir crazy because they can't do it. So there's an addiction to jiu-jitsu for sure. That to me tells me that the product is worth something. It's worth a lot. If you can get addicted to it, if it can bring you this peace and this happiness that it does so often, or, people, I think Professor Flavio talked about jiu-jitsu not so much saving his life, but making his life, giving his life value. And I totally see that, because I meet people whose lives were really saved by jiu-jitsu. It just revolutionized the way that they live. And then there's people who found jiu-jitsu and went, this gave me purpose. And so that happens quite a bit, especially for me. I didn't want to waste my life working on computers and doing all that, I have the best job in the world.
Right. With me interviewing so many different people, I know, and I'm not going in the spirit of bridge burning, but I know a little bit about the Alberto Crane, Gracie Barra, Romulo Bahal. There's business everywhere. So without the spirit of you burning and naming people, no, what's like an example of what took you to get to launching your HQ in Glendale? Was it a loan-based thing? Was it
that part?
Someone, something like that?
No, it was a lot of sacrifice. Mine was mostly sacrifice and sweat equity. I had decided that I was going to open. My IT business was doing really well. And I ended up saving up just as much money as I possibly could, and then did most of it with my own capital. At the time, I think it ran maybe 40 grand for me, 40 to 50 grand for me to do my total academy there. But I never took a paycheck until 2015. So 5 years into it was when I actually got paid, because for the first 4 years, I worked another job. So I put in probably, I don't know. I worked 7 days a week, so I don't know. I would get up at 7. I would go to work, my normal job. I'd work at my clients until like 1 o'clock. And then I would head up to Glendale from Irvine. I would teach any one-on-one intro sessions we had starting around 2 or 3 whenever I got there. I'd start the kids class at 4 or 5. I'd do 2 kids classes and then the adult classes. By the time I closed the academy at 10 o'clock and headed home, I got back to Anaheim where we lived about 11 o'clock. And I did that every day. And then the mistake that I think I made was when I hired help.
Like intro to your school?
Yeah, like instructors. There wasn't the pool of instructors that there was today. There was no ICP. There's no instructor training program from Gracie Barra. It was all the personal relationships that you had. Oh, I can pay this guy $50 a class, or I can do this, I can do that. That's fine. Hiring people is fine. But hiring people who have the same passion is near impossible. And I faced a second challenge later on for that, because once I realized, okay, I got to cut everybody out and just do this all myself. You do a great job. It shows in your classes. People sign up. The school grows. Now you have a whole different problem, whereas it's only you who can do everything. So how do you begin to train other instructors? And that's where I fall back again on some of the teachings that Master Carlos and Professor Marcio gave me, and a lot of the recommendations they gave me about how to try to develop people. And I've done great at that. And I've also failed miserably at that in a few ways, So you have to be really careful with who you hand the keys over to. They have to really follow the same dream as you. And I think you mentioned kind of like a lot of rivalries in jiu-jitsu and a lot of bad business deals and things like this. People change a lot. People enter into an agreement thinking everything's going to be awesome. And then you kind of find out like, man, they don't share the same dream the same way you do.
Same vision. Doesn't match, right?
Doesn't quite match. And that's when things begin to fall apart. And that's what I learned, not to really hire from the outside. Is really and truly raise your own instructors. And when I say raise your own instructors, I don't mean take a guy and train him. I mean, you got to raise this guy from a white belt to a blue belt, start teaching kids classes, make sure he's there with you.
The farm. It's a farm system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But at a certain point, you have to give them a lot of opportunity. Like, hey, it's time for you to start teaching adult classes. What do you want to do? And then at a certain point, you got to go, okay, fantastic. Like, I think you've done a wonderful job. You're a black belt now. I think it's time you own your own academy. And now you help them. You're like, okay, great. Let's go open a Gracie Barra for you. That's what we want. And that's happened a few times. One of my black belts is going to be opening his own academy at some point. And a couple other ones, they find work, which is wonderful because they're doing their dream. So, and that I think is one of the most rewarding parts of my job.
Yeah, because a lot of the older mentality, from what I'm learning, and this is my opinion, it's very like, no, you're mine. You're mine. But this newer school, I would say mid-school and newer school mentality is, hey man, get yours. You've done your time. You're like a brother to me. You're definitely family, and you have the keys to your own car now. You were driving my car, but here's a set of keys for another vehicle. And I think that's something that's important for. I'm interviewing the right person. It's important for people to hear that you gotta put people on the good blast and give them their chance. You're not the owner of them, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're an owner of their experience. And I go back to like talking about the first experience of jiu-jitsu that I had and how it imprinted on me to give me what I have today. You got to remember, like, I firmly believe that black belts belong in front of fundamental classes, GB1 classes. Absolutely. Your first experience should be someone who's so experienced and so a veteran in jiu-jitsu, because they're going to be able to portray jiu-jitsu in a way that purple belts just can't. The purple belt can love jiu-jitsu. They can do an amazing job. They can be great instructors, but they don't convey jiu-jitsu the same way. They just haven't at the time. Man, you're a black belt. You've got 10 years under you. I'm going to talk about jiu-jitsu totally different than a guy who's got the passion of a white belt or a blue belt, just because I've seen so much about it. One thing that I can tell you about new schools opening, I was trying to leave Master Carlos's house one day, and I asked him a question about why it can take 10 years to get a black belt. When I think Grandmaster Carlos spent maybe 3 years under Maeda, maybe 3 years training judo under him. So what happened? And then at a certain point, it was just a belt a year. Should take 5 years. White, blue, purple, brown, black.
And this is the legend Maeda.
Yeah. Well, I think Grandmaster Carlos trained with Maeda for maybe 3 years. That was it. It wasn't much. It wasn't until like the Gracie family, those 5 brothers really developed themselves, and then Holas came along and really changed what jiu-jitsu was and meant. That we have the jiu-jitsu we have today. I said, why does it take 10 years to get a black belt now? And Master Carlos was telling me, he goes, so many people, they were afraid to promote someone to a black belt. They were afraid to promote because as soon as this guy got his black belt, then he would leave. He would go right across the street and he would take all his friends with him, and you would lose half your school. And so when it came down to Master Carlos's students and his black belts, he told them, he's like, great, let's give you a black belt. You earn your black belt. You're you're awesome. Let's go. And let's find you a school, because if I help you, then I help you find a school that's far enough away from me. And you know what? Even if we take 5 of my students or 6 of my students, we seed your new school with experienced people already. So when brand new people come in, they get the same experience that they'd have at a school that's been established for a decade in a school that's been established for 2 months or a month. So all of a sudden, these people, they all started opening up their own academies. And Master Carlos had this vision in his head for a long time. And that's why it's called Gracie Barra. If you look at a lot of the other schools out there, they're all named after the instructor or the founder.
You don't have to hold on to the thing, by the way. Yeah, we're good.
So if you look at all the other schools out there, they tend to be named after someone or an association thereof. It's only kind of the past couple of years where you've had people just come up with abstract names. But I think Gracie Barra was one of the first abstract names. When Carlinhos moved it to Barra da Tijuca, I think the original name was the Gracies of Barra. I think that was what it translated out to. My Portuguese is atrocious, so I can pretend at best. So I think the original name was Gracies of Barra, but he truncated it to just Gracie Barra so that anybody can run the academy, and it's still part of his. It's not Carlos Gracie Jiu Jitsu. It's Gracie Barra. So he really kind of pushed that out there. And when we started that, then people started to pick on us a bit. Oh, you're selling belts, you're doing this, you're doing that. But really what it was we just took the fear out of giving someone a black belt. And we wanted them to open a school. And we say, okay, let's open, but let's open 10 miles away over here where there's let's be strategic about this. And today we have well over 800 schools worldwide. I think we're probably gearing up to be 900 schools. The push that I think Gracie Barra has, is by the end of 2021 to have 1,000 schools worldwide. And I don't know anybody else doing that. And it wouldn't be, if I was so conservative I was afraid this guy would take his students away. I have 10 black belts now, or something like that, like 10 black belts underneath me. If each one of them opened a school, that would be the happiest day of my life. I'd love to see them open a school. There's no problem with it, because you're teaching more jiu-jitsu. You're spreading more jiu-jitsu. So, and that's the goal.
Okay, so it's now time for a quick break. While you're waiting this out at home with us at Believe, you can still have some fun with betting. Do it at betonline.ag. There's no NBA, NHL, or MLB. You might think there's nothing to do, but we got you. BetOnline still has hundreds of places to wager, including their online casino with poker and blackjack. It's not only that, sports aren't totally done. There's so much more, right? There's EA Sports, which has been up and coming. Don't sleep on EA Sports. American Idol, another contest type show like Big Brother. There's also the elections, and there's 750,000 poker series. There is still fun to be had, so go to betonline.ag. Use the promo code MyPod100 will hook you up to receive your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's betonline.ag and use the promo code MyPod100. BetOnline, your online wagering experts. One thing I've learned after speaking and interviewing Jean-Jacques Machado and Higan Machado, they've commonly brought up Carlinhos all the time. They're like, even in one of my interviews, Higan was like, oh, Carlinhos was the guy that taught me how to go A to B to C and C to B to A, like to really okay, this is revolving. And what I'm also learning right now, it seems like from my experience interviewing people, it seems like it's Hals and Carlinhos who are the completely open-minded ones and who added the visionary structure. And then maybe if you could add some more, not that I really want to overpraise Master Carlos Jr., but hey. I think it's still underappreciated.
You mean the impact that Master Carlos has had?
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, you don't grow. Look, my understanding too is, in the early days, everybody was out for themselves a little bit. They were fighting for themselves, and then when it came time to compete, they put on a Gracie Barra patch and they fought for Gracie Barra. Then over time, it was kind of strange because these people would run their own academies. We'd come together. We would teach as Gracie Barra, and then we would fall apart again. And this I think bothered Master Carlos a little bit. I don't know. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, but like he wanted Gracie Barra fighters, he wanted Gracie Barra schools, and he wanted Gracie Barra trophies. He wanted us to be the best competition team, the best jiu-jitsu team, and the widest team in the world, you know. And you don't do that without fighting convention a little bit. You don't do that without making a few enemies. So it may take time, you know, for everyone to say, okay, yeah, he had the best idea, because nobody wants to admit that. Because I'm sure at some point down the line, Master Carlos's ideas and Machado's ideas clashed, you know, collided. They used to teach in the same building, one upstairs, one downstairs, you know, so there was friendship there. I'm friends with Zé Beleza, Leao Teixeira, down in Brazil. Wonderful guy. Absolutely love him. I teach one of his cousins jiu-jitsu. He's one of my brown belts. He's the best with kids, hands down. Best system with the kids. It's fantastic. But he was part of Gracie Barra back in 85, 86. Today, he's his own thing. He and Master Carlos are pretty close, personally close. When it comes to business, Carlinhos just doesn't, nope, you did your thing, I do my thing, leave us alone.
Right.
So there's still some people who are very set in their older ways, and eventually maybe they'll come around. Or if they are successful, and this was from Master Carlos too, if they're successful, he's happy too. Because it's still one person teaching jiu-jitsu. If they're not successful, they should have followed us.
Do you feel like, you know, the older teams like Gracie Barra, Novo União, and we can go on about Alliance, and without the spirit of politics, do you feel it was heavier in Brazil versus the U.S. as far as for politics?
Yes.
From what you've observed, at least?
Yes, I think so. I think it was it's still, look, after being in Brazil a little bit, I spent very little time in Brazil, but after talking with them and after knowing Brazilians, they have a passion, and that passion sometimes trumps their professionality, and they, I don't know what the best way to put it is. It's not so much about business in Brazil as it is about just jiu-jitsu. It's still about jiu-jitsu in America, but it's what the U.S. is allowing us to do as far as the spread of jiu-jitsu. Spread in Brazil, the growth in Brazil was very chaotic. It was splotchy. It was here and it was there, and then guys would fight. They'd get mad over something random, and then a territory dispute, and then boom, there'd be a huge explosion. But when it came to Brazil, when it came to America, it was very organized. I think it was more organized, and I just think that's the American influence in jiu-jitsu. It caused it to be more professional in a way. You go to Brazil sometimes, or you'll go into an academy, and it starts when everyone wants to start, and then it ends when everyone's tired. My class starts at 7 o'clock. There's a water break, technique. It finishes at 7:56 every day. Boom. People have kids. People have dinner. People have parking. People have jobs. We're more scheduled and regimented here. And so once we adapted to that, it allowed Gracie Barra to, I think, grow a lot better. And so we're trying to say, like, hey, it's business, not personal. In Brazil, it was more personal than business. That's my feeling on it. Does that answer your question?
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Because, I was raised in Asia. I lived in Singapore mostly. A lot of it is in the Philippines. And there is something about the U.S. adding structure because it's multiple ethnicities and cultures living in the ocean, essentially. So there's some value to that where you have to be structured. Otherwise, it's going to be Escape from LA, Escape from New York, right? So, it just feels good to, big up the American system of like, hey, we have to be structured here. and thank God everyone's catching on to that about structure.
Yeah. It also goes back to facilitating learning. And if you only have 1 hour to do something, why are you spending 40 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever conditioning? Save the conditioning for later. People used to say to me, we want a conditioning class, or we want this, or we want that. And I would say, look, you come to me to learn Jiu Jitsu. I can teach Jiu Jitsu. The fitness will come along with it. If you want to get in better shape, go get in better shape. There's a gym down the road. You can go anywhere you want and go learn. Yeah, at the time, CrossFit was blowing up too. If you want to be the best at exercising, go do CrossFit. Fantastic. It'll make your Jiu Jitsu better, sure. But if you want to get better at Jiu Jitsu, just keep showing up. But I'm not going to waste 15 minutes of my time getting you in better shape when Jiu Jitsu will do that for you. I will get you, our warm up, I think it runs 9 minutes or something like that. And then there's some cool down in there at the end of the class, which is about 6 minutes or something. But that's the extent of the conditioning that I run. The rest of the conditioning, the rest of the workout is built into Jiu Jitsu. So I don't I think that we respect people's time more than other cultures in a way, maybe, if that's the right way to put it. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but we understand, look, I have only a short period of time to teach you the most jiu-jitsu that I can. So how can I do that the most efficiently? And that's where, the Gracie Barra method really comes into play.
Now, you've also refereed.
I did.
How much of that, you also mentioned in several articles, competition wasn't really for me, but, you kept reffing. But how did reffing help you as I respectfully label it as a non-competitor? How did refereeing help you in jiu-jitsu as a non-competitor?
So yeah, my referee career was very short, but it was there. I did some stuff, especially for the GB Comp Nets when we first opened there. I was a terrible competitor. I'll say that all the time. It just wasn't my thing. I'm not a great competitor. I did it at every rank. I just never had the drive to train that hard, to work out the extra. I wasn't competitive in my jiu-jitsu. My jiu-jitsu was more about learning it, and I just loved the absorption of knowledge. So I knew at some point, if I was going to be teaching jiu-jitsu, the sport arena is where jiu-jitsu shines the most. I knew I wasn't going to be bringing home gold medals, so I had to have knowledge of this piece of our economy, right? This piece of our jiu-jitsu. So I thought, all right, if I'm terrible at I'm not going to win. I better figure out what's actually going on here. And that's when I decided to dive into the rules and really learn about the learn about the rules, and get to see, you get a front row seat to how people are winning and losing. So when I came to train competitors or have competition classes at my school, it was very easy for me to say, oh, well, this is high percentage, this is low percentage, this is what you should be focusing on, this is how we should run our classes. So it made a big difference in how I teach, not so much how I think about jiu-jitsu, but it made a difference in how I ran specific classes. Without it, I felt my school was going to be missing that competitive aspect. Yeah. So by way of learning the rule set, by way of being part of the IBJJF in a very small way, being part of refereeing, I was able to say, look, if we're going to compete, this is how I think we should do it. I didn't do it with a gold medal around my waist. I did it being yelled at in Portuguese for making mistakes a lot, which was awesome because I didn't speak it. So they could swear at me all they wanted.
They're like, oh my God, they're just encouraging me. You know what I'm saying?
Bit, yeah. Yeah. But, it's a tough job. Those guys have the hardest job. Hands down, hardest job.
I bet UFC 249, Dominic Cruz was talking about how hey man, you stopped the fight prematurely. I was still on the come up. And it's the most underrated job. It's like being a teacher, being a cop, or being a server.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the UFC this last weekend, and yeah, I thought that was a really early stoppage. There was just a few seconds left in the round, I believe.
Yep.
Was he defending himself intelligently? Like, he wasn't firing shots back, but if you look at the punches that his opponents were making, look, they weren't direct punches. He was getting up. I think that fight should have gone on. But I've called fights early too. Not fights, I've called matches early too. Nobody wins when you call a match. Because, as a referee, in your heart, look, I prevented this person from getting damaged more.
Right.
But I also robbed him of the opportunity to continue. You're going to make a couple bad choices like that, but in the end, in the referee's defense, he made a decision with the competitors, with the athlete's best interest in mind. That you can sleep with that. Like, I can go to sleep like that, because I felt he was in danger. I felt he wasn't going to protect himself. I didn't want him to get hurt, so I had to step in. My job was to step in, and that's what he did. Maybe it was off. I think it was off.
Do you think it's harder to ref an MMA fight versus a jiu-jitsu fight because there's strikes involved? Or is that way too evergreen and so many maths behind that?
There's no points in MMA that you have to score as a referee. As a referee in MMA, you just sit back and go, okay, he's bleeding a lot. Let's stop. Or call the fight. I think the jiu-jitsu referees, they probably have it a little harder. They do. Number one, it's all day. It's a long day, and you get a lot of fatigue. By the time you're 6 hours into this, you've barely got a little bit of lunch. Man, you're forgetting sometimes what happens, and also because of the points, you have to kind of feel people's intention as well as remember where they started from. Because remember, a sweep isn't instantaneous all the time. It could start, they could move, they could change, the position can move around a little bit, they could sit back down, and then finally the guy falls over. Okay, now that was points, or that wasn't points. So the referee in jiu-jitsu has to think a lot more in MMA. I mean, I haven't reffed an MMA fight, but
Let me tell you something.
that's what I think. I think the jiu-jitsu guys have a lot harder.
Right. And because the benefit of revolving and rotating referees, like it's never the same referee from the previous fight carrying on to the next. They normally have a pecking order. Okay, co-main event, Herb Dean. Main event, John McCarthy.
Yeah. I mean, the fights are, 15 to 25 minutes. So 25 minutes can be a lot because you're moving around, you're sweating your ass off, you're busy. But go ref kids matches for 3 hours and tell me how you feel. It's tough, man.
Yeah, I can imagine the white noise is so direct from the parents too. That or even just the audience, it's so white noise derived too, right? Okay, that laughter and that facial expression is
parents. I am a parent. Parents are horrible people. Sometimes, man, I am just floored by just the lack of sportsmanship amongst parents is sometimes the most jarring thing. You can't yell at a 5-year-old like that. What are you expecting out of a 5-year-old? What are you expecting out of a 12-year-old? These are still children, and I think people because jiu-jitsu is a combat sport, I think sometimes parents want to live through their kids because they never had the chance to do a combat sport like this. And sometimes they are just the absolute worst people in the world. They're also sometimes the best, there's no loss darker than a jiu-jitsu loss or a fight like an MMA loss. There's no loss darker than that. Go back and listen to Ronda Rousey after she lost to Holly Holm and how mentally exhausting and how bad that hurt. The most depressing scene I've ever seen was the locker room to the Worlds one year on a Sunday. I was working and I walked through the locker room, and you have the biggest and best fighters on the planet of jiu-jitsu, the guys who could get here, black belts, just head in their hands, just balling it out. And the same thing, the kids go through the same thing. And I've seen parents look at them go, what's wrong with you? How could you lose? How could you lose to him? Why did you do it this way? Why did you do it that way? To a parent that maybe has never trained a day in their life. You also get to see the golden parents, though. There are some amazing parents out there who are like, man, win, lose, or draw, we're proud of you. We love you. This is awesome. And I'm happy to say that there's more of those than there are of the other ones.
Well, that's good to hear.
But parents can be just – I think they just forget that you have a child doing a very adult thing, which is fighting. And you can't – children are very delicate. I think they're going to remember that, you know. And the biggest crime of all, I think, is that they might lose their joy in jiu-jitsu. No one the hardest kid to train, the hardest kid to teach is the kid that's there because his dad threw him out there and refuses to let him quit. Sometimes these kids need to quit just to preserve their jiu-jitsu.
Did you ever have to suggest that to a parent? Like, hey, you know, as much as, you know, I want my academy to grow, this might not be for your kid now, or maybe later down the line you could re-enroll him. But for right now, this may not be for him or her.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have a rule of thumb that I go by, you know, with the all the kids we have. If your kid fights you going to jiu-jitsu, fight the fight. Force him. If your kid fights you going there, fight the fight. How is your child when you leave? If your kid is happy that he came and enjoyed the class and it was good, then you did the right thing and fight the fight. But if your kid is angry in the beginning and angry that they came, then it's time to stop for a little while, at least, because there's no learning taking place. They're no longer having fun. So they're not learning anything. They're just going through the motions for you. And the other thing is, it's very hard to tear your kid away from a more preferred activity. Given the opportunity, I'd sit here and play video games all day too and not want to go to jiu-jitsu. So of course, jiu-jitsu is work. I'm going to get beat up. I'm going to get sweaty. I'm going to get knocked around. I would much rather sit here and play video games and get beat up. But once I go, I'm happy. I'm proud that I went. I did a great job. I'm really happy. I have more drive. I want to do something. So there's that. That's why I say take the attitude at the end, not at the beginning.
Now, do you feel you've had to do that, or if you can remember having to do that for an adult? Where you go,
No.
You know what, man? Oh, okay. It's really confined to children. Adults, for you needing to step in.
Adults are a little bit more, they're going to do what they're going to do. We'll rationalize. Children don't really rationalize. Adults will rationalize anything. I don't want to do this anymore because I'm worried about my hands getting hurt and I'm a musician. Okay, no problem. I don't want to do this anymore because I can't afford it. I don't have the time. These things I don't really believe. You know, I can't afford it and I don't have the time are just excuses. It just means you didn't have a good experience, or you didn't fall in love with jiu-jitsu. Wasn't your thing.
Wouldn't you rather stomach and have someone tell you, you know, I just don't like doing this? Is it better to hear instead of them saying, you know what, I just, you know, I'm prioritizing my violin work and I know
that's
your
fine.
child's there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, they if they enjoy doing something else over jiu-jitsu, that's fine. Look, you tried it. Jiu-jitsu, in Gracie Barra, we have the saying, you know, jiu-jitsu for everyone. And that's true. Everyone should start it. Everyone should try it. Jiu-jitsu is not for everyone to stick with for their entire life. You know, give me 6 months. Give me 6 months. If you like 6 months, great. Let's go to a year. Let's work on 1 year. In 1 year, I can get you out of your white belt. That means you can survive in a fight. Self-defense. I've taught you 1 year how to keep yourself alive. Not win, but keep yourself alive. Give you your blue belt, and then let's see what happens, you know, from there. But I think I hear some excuses sometimes that just bother me. I do think that you're right. It's refreshing to just go, look, jiu-jitsu is number 4 on my list of things to do. That's it. And I'm like, all right, cool. When it's number 1 or number 2, the academy will be here. Keep your gi. I'll teach you when you come back. You know, I'm happy with that.
Romulo Bahal, he's known for like team competition, and then Alberto Crane. You know, I've been there where I've seen TJ Dillashaw. They have a partnership with Bang Muay Thai, so there's this MMA vibe now. With your academy, what can someone expect to get? Like the vibe, the feeling. What can someone expect to achieve enrolling at your place?
I did everything I could to replicate the very early days of my jiu-jitsu, which was show you the most technical jiu-jitsu that I can teach, because that's what I was taught. I wasn't taught to beat each other up. I was taught to learn a lot of technique, and then through time and patience and hard work, you would be very good at it, right? There's no such thing as a really bad black belt. Like, you can't do something for 10 years and then be crummy at it, or 6 years and be crummy at it, right? So I was just taught that patience and that survival, that smoothness to it, that get back up and come back in the next day. There's another 5 minutes of rolling. There's not a lot of I do a lot to cut up the personalities in the class, where GB1, that's all fundamental stuff, or not fundamental stuff. We don't have fundamentals anymore. I can get off on that tangent. But anyway, GB1, where everybody begins. You're not going to find anybody going crazy in that class. No one's working. We're all learning. GB2, okay. Now you're going to find there's guys that are much more intense, much more technical. GB3, there you're going to find the competition drum, and you're going to find the people who just grind it out. It's a pyramid. GB1 has 25 people in it. GB2 has 12. GB3 has 6, depending on the day. You understand? I mean, these are rough numbers, but you can see it goes like that. If you ran your whole academy based on MMA fighters and the toughest of the toughest guys, you would have so few students you couldn't pay the bills. Most of the time, those guys who are training for MMA, or the hardcore competitors, they don't have time for a real job anyway. They can't pay their tuition. So it doesn't make – you don't run an entire academy around those competitors. You run an entire academy for the sake of jiu-jitsu, for the sake of teaching, for the love of the passion of jiu-jitsu. And then if you get 6 guys that go to the Worlds, great. If I get 1, great. If I never get a guy who wins a gold medal, I don't care. You know, I've taught 1,000 people jiu-jitsu. I've introduced jiu-jitsu to however many people I can. And that's my goal. That's my job.
Well, Professor Robert, this has been hopefully just a part 1. Maybe we could do a couple more.
Hey, when I told someone I was going to be doing this, and they said, "What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Well, talk about jiu-jitsu." So I said it's going to be jiu-jitsu and barbecue, and then sure enough, your first couple of questions were about jiu-jitsu and barbecue.
Right, like society. It was so funny how you were typing, "Oh, I'm shipping tamales for the new kids." Am I cultural appropriating? You know what I'm saying? I thought that was awesome. Do you think societally, this is more a societal question, do you feel because of this pandemic and everyone is living in a virtual world, the Gen Z kids, not only are they digital natives, but now you've taken away the feeling, the sense of touch of people. Well, I mean, do you think that it's going to affect them even more and be more virtual? They're going to have a pronounced amount of incels, I feel.
You know, you're speaking as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, I hope, or just
or societal, just in general, whichever your mind tells you to talk about.
It's always going to go to jiu-jitsu, but you know what? I think that there was already enough of people staying at home. If you look at the business world, what was one of the bigger businesses that was starting to really come up, which was food delivery. Yelp, Grubhub, you know, you can order directly off of those, you know, Postmates, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. There was already people who are working from home, who are, you know, telecommuting, who Amazon delivers in a day here in Los Angeles. You can get food in an hour and a half. You technically never have to leave your house. And so there's some people who are making a living like that. There were already a chunk of people doing that. When we hit this pandemic, I think more people just realized that they don't need to go outside. Now, as far as like jiu-jitsu is concerned, I've already seen an uptick in people contacting me for intro lessons online, because number one, when you stay home all the time, you lack fitness. You become sedentary, and then you start to lose some social skills. When kids lose social skills, it's very bad. As an adult, we pick and choose. We can go make friends. We can not make friends. I think adults, we can figure out a way. We have social media. We can have friends, virtual friends. Children do not do well with they just can't do it. They have to have real people. So, you know, with people today being able to live almost 100% alone, you know, they're going to come and go. They're going to start jiu-jitsu. They're going to try to learn jiu-jitsu online. Hopefully they'll come in. They find a whole new community, and it takes them out of their house, and it gives them that one piece, that one escape from their entire life. And here it is with people, you know. So I think that that's going to help build much better relationships. But kids can't live alone. No, kids need a society. Without it, they become destructive, you could say. Like, sure, my place is a mess all the time because my kids can't leave. So I take them to the academy and they destroy the academy because it's a padded room, you know. So I think it's bad for jiu-jitsu. I think that for people who are doing jiu-jitsu, they need that physical touch. It's just something that we have to have. So, you know, hopefully it turns around soon. I gotta have classes soon, man. Like, as an instructor, I need to be in front of people. Look, I'm talking to you now for like an hour and a half because no one else will listen to me. I don't have a class to talk to anymore.
Well, hopefully it's also because, you know, we can get down behind the microphone and it's just, you know, chopping up life talk, jiu-jitsu talk and stuff like that. But yeah, this has been great. You know, we'll talk behind the scenes and hopefully I get to see you and hang out and pick you up on that cupcake.
Absolutely. I will we'll for sure keep in contact with you about that.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Professor Robert here. Where can they get a hold of you? Social media, your address, all things BJJ.
Yeah, you know, the Academy's GB Glendale, Gracie Barra Glendale. We have our Instagram, GB Glendale. I don't do social media very well, but I do have it. I think my Instagram name is InstaRobert.
InstaBert?
InstaBert, there you go. Yeah. I made that a long, long time ago. And I don't use it that much anymore, but man, I'm on there once a week. I'll jump on there or find me on the Academy's page or find me on my personal page, and then we'll go from there.
Cool. Thank you so much, man. And
thanks a lot, Charles.
I appreciate you. Thanks.
Hey, you're welcome. All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.